It's Monday, the 16th of October. My name's Juan Brown. You're watching the Blanco Lirio channel and fresh back from Dead Cow Playa, watching the eclipse during the High Sierra Fly-In and Stole Drag Championship race. Also, fresh back from a Boeing 777 check ride at the airlines, and I thought I'd take this opportunity to go over what it's like to get a check ride these days on an aircraft like the Boeing 777. Annual recurrent training is a fact of life for professional airline pilots. It's something we got to go through every year. It's something we kind of dread, like going to the oral surgeon or something like that, because it's very stressful. Yeah, you're laying your license on the line, so to speak, each year that you go to do this, but it's really an inoculation program to inoculate you from screwing up on the flight line and from primarily complacency. Why? Because when you're flying the airlines regularly, as much as 80 or 100 hours a month, even when you're flying at that rate, rarely does anything ever happen. And so you have to continuously practice and rehearse your emergency procedures because they simply rarely ever happen. In 24 years of flying, for me, I've only suffered one engine failure while flying for the airlines. So you got to stay sharp. You got to stay ready for that emergency procedure. And one way to guarantee that you're going to remain focused is by putting you through a stressful check ride program every year. And besides, if you're a general aviation pilot, after speaking with my insurance broker, Jerry Clemens of Clemens Aviation Insurance, these sort of training programs help you with your insurance on general aviation flying as well, because that puts you in a professional pilot category who's getting regular professional training. So for the rest of us that are flying just general aviation, it brings up the question, is the BFR, the biannual flight review, good enough to go out and have a $100 hot dog with a flight instructor and call it good? It's much better to put yourself through a standardized training program. And this training program at the airlines is very standardized. It's the stress that we suffer while we go through this check ride is that of our own self-induced stress. We want to perform perfectly each time, but there's no such thing as a perfect check ride. And the most important advice is, if you make a small mistake, don't let it freak you out. Just press on like it didn't happen and continue to operate the check ride in a normal fashion. It's very easy on any of these check rides, as you know, getting your private pilot's rating or any of your ratings. If you make one mistake, it's very easy to allow it to snowball into a series of mistakes. And these are the good folks that are going to be administering the check ride and all the torture in the simulator. And the best thing you can do to make their job easier is simply show up professionally well prepared for your check ride. If you show up prepared for your check ride, that makes these guys happy and puts smiles on their faces, just like this. Here we are inside the simulator, getting ready to take off at JFK under very snowy conditions, doing our icing profile, where we go through a complete de-icing program to prepare for the takeoff. More on that in a minute. But these check ride profiles each year are very carefully choreographed, exactly choreographed, such that they're all the same. Everybody gets tested to the exact same standard, and each of these check ride profiles have to be FAA approved. And what the check ride profile consists of is available to you as a pilot through all the different training materials that are available to you, including all the slides for the briefings of each of the, 1, 2, 3, 4 days of training that you're going to be there for. So if you just take time to go through the material, the training material, before you actually get there, and stay in the books and stay up with all the current hot items and the current changes to call outs and that sort of thing. That's one thing that's constant in the industry, is different people are always getting in charge of the training and standardization at your airline, and so they make these subtle little changes to some of the simplest things that you do every day in and out of the airlines, including the various call outs that you need to be aware and up to speed on what these most current call-outs and standard operating procedures are, because that's what they're going to be looking for in your check ride. So plan on spending 6 days total for the whole training footprint, a day to commute in the day before and a day to commute home, and then 4 days of training. The first day is academics training, and they'll pick a series of systems to study, not all of the systems, but just a handful of systems. This particular time it was hydraulics, flight controls, landing gear, wheels, and brakes. And then you'll spend the remaining 3 days in the simulator, culminating in that loft or line-oriented flight training scenario, along with some AQP, Advanced Qualification Pilot Training programs, where we'll review recent incidents and practice those recent incidents in the simulator. And the way that you're paired up can be a bit of a challenge on the Boeing 777, since we usually have one captain and up to 3 first officers. You may very well be paired up with 2 first officers, or maybe you're just paired up by yourself with a sim-P or a simulator pilot in the opposite seat. I want to jump back on hydraulics here for a second and kind of do a follow-up on that FedEx Boeing 757 gear-up landing. Here on the Boeing 777, like the Boeing 767, all the heavy hitters are here on the center system. And the 777 uses left and right engine-driven pumps on the left and right hydraulic systems, and then left and right electric demand pumps on the left and right hydraulic system. And then on the center system, it's got the 2 center electric hydraulic pumps and then 2 pneumatic pumps. So they're using pneumatic bleed air pressure to run a pump to run hydraulics. And then, of course, the ram air turbine is here on the center system as well. And again, any 3 of these systems can operate any one of these systems can operate the flight controls for the entire aircraft. And again, the gear, wheels, and brakes have a isolation system here in the center system. Now, the Boeing 777 alternate gear extension system is similar to that to the Boeing 75 and 76, and the word on the street that we're getting on the FedEx situation was that the flex line to the landing gear broke, so they lost the hydraulics in the case of the 75 for the left hydraulic system. I still don't know why the power transfer unit didn't work unless that fluid was lost as well. However, there's also indications that regarding the alternate gear extension system on that aircraft electrically did not work. For some reason, there was a problem with the switch on the alternate gear extension electric switch to drive that little electric motor to take that last bit of trapped hydraulic fluid and unlock the locks on the landing gear so that that landing gear could free fall. So for you keyboard warriors that are saying, boy, that's not a very good system, it doesn't look like it's 3 different ways to lower the gear to me, remember, this is the first time I can think of in aviation history that a Boeing 757, after millions of hours of flying and landings and takeoffs, the first time that I've heard of that they could not get the gear down on a 75. And I only heard of it the one other time on the 767. And I've never heard of a problem yet on the Boeing 777. But you still got to know and understand the system. And here's a better view that shows how one system can operate enough of the flight controls to keep the aircraft operating. For example, you got a right and a left elevator, and there's all 3 hydraulic systems operating that. Ailerons, all 3 systems operating that. Rudder, all 3 systems operating that as well, including the ram air turbine. And again, the ram air turbine has nothing to do with the alternate gear extension. Now, the inside of these simulators is a full cockpit of the Boeing 777 with full visual surrounding the cockpit windows and full motion as well on hydraulic stilts like this. And this provides simulation, which of course is much safer than doing it in the actual airplane, but primarily is much less expensive than doing it in the actual airplane. Once in the simulator, you practice the usual routine items that you practice every year, like, for example, a engine failure at the worst case scenario at V1 rotate, where you got to go through the script and you got to do everything just right for this critical phase of flight. Because again, remember, each and every one of these flights in an airliner is engineered to lose an engine at this critical time and still have enough power on the remaining good engine to get the aircraft up and around the pattern and back for a safe landing. But what happens when the engine failure occurs somewhere else in your flight profile outside of the usual V1 rotate thing that you've been practicing for years? The incredible amount of automation built in the Boeing 777 is built in to really help you with that worst case scenario quite easily. But once you're outside of that normal V1 cut scenario, you got to do some pilot stuff. And I got to get back on this United 777. The NTSB final report is out on that, and there's some great stuff to learn from this situation here, where they popped an engine, climbing through a little above 12,000 feet or so on the climb out as they were heading towards the Rockies. But here in the simulator, they give you a good rule of thumb: autopilot on, hit the toga button. That gets the remaining good engine back up to go around power, because it may very well be in a climb power setting, and that'll recover that power back up on that remaining good engine. Heading select, get that heading going where you want the aircraft to go, and then finally run the speed bug up, get the speed bug up so that you can continue, if you need to retract the flaps and get the aircraft all cleaned up and get the aircraft flying at your correct single engine speed. Another good one they threw at us in the simulator this time was, what if you pop an engine on a go-around? Now that's a real surprising moment, and that's a big part of what all this training is about, is recognizing the fact that you're going to be startled, and it's going to take you at least 4 seconds to even get over the fact that something like this has happened to you in real life, not just in the simulator. And then you're gonna have to get over that startle factor and get on with the checklist and get on with life. And in some cases, we reviewed a case in Human Factors where the crew flew through such a nasty hailstorm that obliterated the view out of the front of their windows and just terribly damaged the aircraft, that one of the pilots had to reach over and physically touch the other pilot and said something like, "John, it's okay, we're got through this, let's get on with the checklist," just to get them out of that startle factor. So try an engine failure on a go around. Again, same procedure. You're going to want to hit that toga button again to make sure that if the autopilot's on, that engine gets up to the power setting that you want it to be for the one engine procedure. Heading select, just get the aircraft going straight ahead, right down the runway, and then speed bug that. Get that speed bug up so that you can get that aircraft accelerating and get it cleaned up, and then carry on just like it was a standard single engine procedure. Now, what happens if you lose an engine while in cruise flight? And this is what happened to us on our Hawaiian flight years ago, when you're on one of the designated track systems on an international flight, especially something like the NATS, the North Atlantic Track System, those tracks that get you from the East Coast over to Europe. These tracks can be very busy. Looking at today's Flight Radar 24 at, here it is, 1:18 in the afternoon, California time, and the afternoon flights are all marching back to the States along the track system. When you lose an engine at altitude up here, you need to get off of that track and get out of everybody's way, because obviously you're not going to be able to maintain altitude on one engine. So you got to get down in a logical order. Now, the FAA has developed a standard program for getting off of the tracks in the event of an emergency. But how do you quickly do this while you're actually operating the aircraft? Remember, the autopilot's on, you're in RVSM airspace, and so you're going to want to do this entire procedure with the autopilot on. So the first thing you're going to want to do is go offset 5 right or left right, depending on what side you want to go to, where your diversion alternate is. And of course, that's what you've been studying the whole time you've been flying up across the track, is where you're going to go to next as your different alternate routes come and go. So offset left or right, so RL right or left, 5. Select 20,000 feet in the altitude select window because you're going to want to get to below the NAT tracks. But don't push the button for the altitude just yet. And then on the FMX box, you're going to want to set engine out for your descent. You're going to want to do an engine out speed for your descent in order to comply with this right here. Maintain flight level if able, or minimize climb or descent rate. So in the event of a single engine situation, you're going to want to hit your engine out speed, and that'll put full power on the remaining good engine and just gently descend the aircraft at that speed, at that engine out speed, until it gets to this offset, and then the aircraft will get to your 5-mile offset. Now once you're at your offset, now you can consider your company speed, or ETOPS speed, to your alternate airport, which will be a faster speed and a lower altitude. Now you can go ahead and start descending rapidly now that you're out of the way of the track, and descend to your altitude, your habitable single engine altitude at ETOPS speed, so you're not malingering out there over the ocean forever on a just an engine out speed. You want to get to your alternate quickly using your ETOPS speed. So you're going to offset 5 miles, get down below the tracks, and of course you're going to be declaring the Mayday on the radio on 121.5 and maybe on 1234, because again, you're in a non-radar environment, and they're going to see this. They're going to see you diverting right away as soon as you put this into your FMS, and then you can begin to notify dispatch and everybody else as to what's going on with the nature of your emergency and get on with the appropriate checklists. In fact, I bet as soon as you start diverting, Flight Radar 24 will pick that up as well and flag your flight. And remember, these various tracks can be as little as 30 miles apart from each other. Now here's a good one they gave us in the simulator that's based on some real world experience. What if you're crossing some high mountains, the Rockies or the Andes, for example? You're up at your maximum altitude and you get into mountain wave and you begin to overspeed the aircraft. Well, when you get up to a real high altitude, this is a fair example, but it gets even more narrow. Here we are at 36,000 feet. The difference between your VNE, your never exceed speed, your red line right here shown by the red zipper, and your stall speed, or the beginning of your stall speed, the amber hook, in this example is only 40 knots of separation. If you continue to get higher and higher altitude, and or depending on your weight, you may be operating in what's called a coffin corner of maybe only 30 knots or less. So autopilot's on, and the Boeing 777 protections will not completely prevent you from going into the red line. So if you get a mountain wave turbulence or a mountain wave effect where the wind is blowing up over the mountains and creating a updraft, and you fly into this updraft, but you're going to maintain altitude, what's going to happen to your airspeed? It's going to increase, and your airspeed may very well increase beyond red line before the auto throttles can react to it. So what's the first natural human reaction is you want to rip those throttles back to idle. Remember, you're way up at high altitude, 36,000 feet. These engines, though they're flat rated up to an extent, by the time you get up to these altitudes, the power that these engines are producing is considerably less, and more importantly, the spool up time of these engines is very, very slow. So the best technique to do is not just rip the throttles back to idle, because if you do that, you're going to turn your high speed event into a low speed event and force yourself to descend. Instead, as we demonstrated in the simulator, just back the throttles up a little bit and then begin to feather the speed brakes. Take the spoilers and start deploying those spoilers just enough to get out of the zipper, and then as soon as you're out of the zipper, begin retracting those spoilers and get that power back in right away. Kind of like feathering the clutch on a dirt bike on a hill climb. Same kind of concept. Just use the spoilers to help you get rid of that excess airspeed, and don't rip the throttles all the way back to idle and turn your high speed event into a low speed event. The actual check ride portion of your recurrent training is just a normal flight, but all the way from gate to gate, and the check airmen are looking for complete standardization of standard operating procedures, making all the call outs just right. And then in this case, it's going to be a icing profile, which is very stressful for us Boeing 777 guys that are only flying from LA to Sydney or LA to London, because we never see icing, rarely ever, on our regular routes. I haven't seen icing in quite a few years myself. So this is good. This forces us to get back into the books and study this. And you know it's going to be an icing profile. You know what the loft profile is. It's published. So there's no excuse to get in the books and study for the profile. And the neat thing nowadays is there's an app for that. There's an app for everything now. When you start studying the books, you'll see all these pages and pages of engineering data for the anti-ice formulas that they're going to use on your aircraft. But now with this app, you can simply open the app, put in your flight number. It knows where you are, what the current weather is, and it will put in the current weather conditions for you. Or you can add the temperature, the precipitation type, the intensity of the precipitation, the type of anti-ice formula that you're going to use on the aircraft, and there's dozens of different types. And then it even gives you a clock with the amount of time that icing fluid will be good for the given weather conditions that you have programmed into the app. It also gives you all the checklists for configuring and deconfiguring the aircraft, because you don't want to gas everybody out with the fumes of the anti-ice fluid, and the checklists for reconfiguring the aircraft after you've de-iced the aircraft. And it even gives you the exact script that you're going to use verbatim between you and the Iceman or the Snowman, the guy out there de-icing your aircraft. So it makes a very standardized procedure for something that you don't normally do. And that's what you're going to be tested on. As you proceed on this short flight during your loft, in this case it was from JFK to Boston, they'll throw in a couple of minor distractions, and it may be one very simple little mechanical problem, which has a very short checklist, and they're just checking on your use of crew resource management and your proper use of aviate, navigate, and communicate. So no need to fear the big annual check ride. All the information is out there that they're going to give you for your check ride for that year. And Pete, if you show up prepared and professional, you'll get through the program, no problem, and you'll learn a thing or two from these guys here. Thank you so much for your support from the folks over on Patreon that make this content possible. See you here. What do you say, Pete? Aviate, navigate, communicate. How's that go?
That's it.
Oh yeah, Pepe! That's it, Pepe! Go, Pepe! Oh yeah! Yeah! Bullseye.